So let's start with what is a gray machine. Obviously, we know in Kentucky most forms of gambling. We don't have casinos, we don't have anything in Kentucky other than historic horse racing. But yet we're seeing a lot of machines pop up all over the Commonwealth in gas stations, hotels, that are slot machines, basically. So what are these machines that we're seeing in Kentucky?
Well, I think you have to start with the term that they're called, gray machines. And, I had some people, well, are they actually gray? I said, no, it's a phrase they operate within the gray area of the law. We have the Kentucky Lottery, we have charitable gaming, and we have horse racing. Mm-hmm. Those are the only three forms of gaming that we have, legal gaming in the Commonwealth. These companies that produce these machines have scouted the country looking for states that have maybe some openings, some loopholes in their law, or they allow gaming, but there's a question mark. So they see that as a weakness, mm-hmm. and they really do infiltrate and set up shop and really become difficult to remove.
And I know this is a hard question to answer, but how many do you feel that we have here in Kentucky? Because we've seen them spread quite a bit, and this issue started to come up last year. Do you feel like it's grown quite a bit since last year?
Oh, it definitely has. And one of the concerning parts for me was during the interim, we brought some of the companies in to talk about that, and they couldn't answer that question. So to me, that is an alarming issue. It's alarming that there's this mindset of we're just going to come in and put these wherever we want, and there's no limitation whatsoever, and they're not even being accountable to the ones that are here. Estimates, last year, 12,000. This year, I'm hearing upwards of 40,000.
Wow.
Yes, it is an alarming issue.
And obviously they're not regulated. As we hear about issues that come up, so we talk about sports gaming in Kentucky, which we still haven't passed, and things like that, where there's a lot of talk about regulation and taxes, how many
Mm-hmm.
Tax dollars we get in from this. So the whole problem here, from my understanding, is that these machines are not taxed, regulated, anything. They're just kind of, it's a free-for-all right now. Is that right?
100%. And the companies that have these machines are well versed in how to become ingrained into communities. They'll come in and they'll have very colorful conversations with local leaders and say that, well, this is what we're going to provide for you. This is what we're pro small business. This is going to be good for your communities. It's going to help them through the pandemic, and they're very well versed on how to kind of navigate those systems. But no, they are their business model as far as what their payouts go separate topic, but are really kind of difficult for me to sit here and say, well, that's a good thing that we need to go ahead and incorporate across the Commonwealth. You brought up sports gaming, and I think that that's an important piece. You see the struggles that sports gaming, the people advocates for sports gaming have gone through. Mm-hmm. It's still not legal here. If you would have thought that if they used the same mindset or the same business model that gray machines did, people would be doing it right now. And so you've got two different industries here. One that's wanting to do it the right way, mm-hmm. legislation first, or the one who said, we're going to come in, set up shop, and then we will dictate what the legislation looks like. That's not how we should be doing things. I'm a fundamentalist when it comes to rule of law, and that's not how we have systems and we have guidelines for how we're supposed to do things, and that's not what's happening.
And last year is the first time we really heard about these gray machines, and we had legislation brought up last year.
Yes.
That did not pass. So what are we, again, this is the whole problem is tax and regulate, and just that there's no oversight over this at all. I think that probably you've heard from people who monitor people with gambling addictions, the
Yes.
whole reason that we've had debates in Kentucky about
Right.
gaming in the first place, about how this affects Kentuckians. So how would we address this through legislation, and do we see that passing in the 2023 session?
Well, I was pretty disappointed that we weren't able to get it across the finish line last year. There were some hurdles, and we just ran out of time at the very end. I think that if we had a couple more days, I feel like we could have. I invested a lot of time and energy in that one, so I was really connected to that one. But as former L&O chairman Adam Koenig said, you can't become too emotionally attached to any one bill. But as an Irishman, I can't hold that part back. And obviously there are different paths to get there. and I believe that the path that that we're working on will definitely get us there. And I do feel completely optimistic that we've had a lot of different groups that were actually against us last year come out either neutral or for us this year because they've seen what's been going on, and they're starting to kind of take a 10,000 feet up view and look at what's going on in other states and say, those are the problems that we're about to get in 2 or 3 years. We don't want those. So they're really changing course, and I think that's adds to the optimism.
So let's talk about some of the arguments against dealing with gray machines that we hear about. One of those is, will it affect places like Chuck E. Cheese and Dave & Buster's? What is a skill game? But also that it would hurt small businesses. And, the Kentucky Chamber is for dealing with this issue. And
sure,
we support small businesses.
Right.
So there's a lot of talking points. Like you said, they're well-versed in coming into a community and having these types of things. But how do you respond to those?
Well, first, I think that we have to make a definite delineation between games of amusement versus gambling. During the interim, we had groups that would talk about problem gaming or problem gambling in the communities. And they monitor these issues. They're not worried about Chuck E. Cheese. They're not worried about Dave & Buster's. They're not worried about the state fair.
Right.
Oktoberfest, all of those things that offer games of amusement. And I think we have to clearly describe or kind of delineate what those are, and I think that reasonable people know what those are. If you're getting a stuffed animal, right, that's or a goldfish, hopefully not a goldfish because they never last very long. Right. But I think that's what I think that the people that are supporting the gray machines are saying, well, that's the same thing, and it's definitely not. And those have been around for a long time, and those will continue, and everyone recognizes that they're not, that's not gambling. The gambling groups that monitor gambling, that's not even on their radar. However, these gray machines have had such an impact. The map that they showed, they said if we would have indicated the problems that have come out of these gray machines, every county in the Commonwealth would have had an indication of color, meaning that it was an issue, some of them incredibly significant. So I think that that's a point worth mentioning, that they're not even monitoring the games of amusement, but these machines exhibit all of the issues that those groups that monitor problem gaming are alarmed about.
And when we talk about problem gaming, a lot of the time we're talking about how much money people tend to lose when playing these types of games. Is there any figures about gray machines and how much money people are losing or how much they're paying out to people that are playing these games? Are there any figures around that?
That's an excellent question, but nobody knows the answers to that. And that's why this is a problem. Right. That's why there's no oversight, there's no monitoring, there's nothing going along with this. So there are companies who are definitely benefiting. We mentioned small businesses. There are some who are. Again, take a look at Pennsylvania. There's currently 150 lawsuits that gray machine companies have had or have with mom and pop businesses. Mom and pop businesses ran these gray machines for several years and said, this is not what we want. The money is great, but all of the extra things, all the peripheral issues, the collateral damage that's occurring, crime in their communities, break-ins, all of those things that they do not want, they're wanting out, and they're being sued by these companies. That doesn't sound like pro-small business to me. And small business owners, to me, I'm incredibly empathetic to the struggles they went through during the pandemic. You can't not. They're the cornerstones of all of our communities. And again, the cornerstone of capitalism is entrepreneurialism. And those are the people who have put their money where their mouth is as far as capitalists go, and they should be helped. But I think that one of the things that brings out a little emotion for me is how I feel like they're being taken advantage of. The payouts, the percentages. Let's have a bigger conversation about that. Let's not have a company come in and say, well, this is our wish list, and this is what you're going to do because we're going to bail you out during the pandemic and hopefully get you addicted to the easy money, and therefore it's part of your business model. And that's not how we do things around here.
Obviously, this is a really sensitive issue for a lot of people. We're seeing ads for and against both things.
Yes.
But I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want people to know about this issue, or that you want them to know about what will go on in the 2023 session?
Well, I think one of the most important things for me, for people to know, because I get asked a lot of questions about it, and from other members of the General Assembly. I spent probably 2 or 3 months after session last year, looking at a regulation model. And I examined all the states that had them, and I looked at what needed to be done. And it was one of those things that was incredibly challenging for us to be able to do. I believe in small government. I don't believe that we should be starting whole branches of government to regulate other industries. I believe that we have a pretty good system as we do. I looked at the costs, and I also looked at the negative impacts on the communities in those states. And I listened to people who were once on board with them and now are on the other side. So that really shaped kind of what my mindset was, because I am not going to be against something unless I investigate it completely. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think it's worth mentioning is there's a lot of money tied up in advocating for these games, to legalize these gray machines. And one of the things that the groups have been very, very skilled at doing is controlling the narrative as far as the language. They are gray machines. There are games of chance. They are games of chance. It is gambling, no matter what anybody tells you. I have played them to see. I'm not going to say that I sat back and was just like, well, those are. No, I know the system. I know the layout. And there are just so many issues with these machines being next to toy dispensers, in areas that are not age controlled, that there are kids playing these across the Commonwealth, and they're cashing in tickets, and they're not being cashed, but deals are being made to cash those tickets. This has got to stop. We have got to get to ground zero. We've got to break this all the way back down, and down the road, if somebody wants to come along and say, hey, we have this idea for a new gaming option, then let's do it that way. And the way it's been done has been wrong. It's just been morally and ethically wrong.